Chapter 11, Quidditch. As they entered November, the weather turned very cold. The mountains around the school became icy gray, and the lake like chilled steel. Every morning the ground was covered in frost. Hagrid had been seen from the upstairs windows, defrosting broomsticks on the Quidditch pitch, bundled up in the moleskin overcoat, rabbit fur gloves, and enormous beaver skin boots. The Quidditch season had begun. On Saturday, Harry would be playing in his first match after weeks of training, Gryffindor versus Slytherin. If Gryffindor won, they would move up into second place in the house championship. Hardly anyone had seen Harry play because Wood had decided that, as their secret weapon, Harry should be kept, well, secret. But the news that he was playing secret had leaked out somehow, and Harry didn't know which was worse, people telling him he'd be brilliant or people telling him they'd be running around underneath him, holding a mattress. He was really lucky that Harry now had Hermione as a friend. He didn't know how he'd got through all the homework without her. What with all the last-minute Quidditch practice Wood was making them do, she also lent him Quidditch Through the Ages, which turned out to be a very interesting read. Harry learned that there were 700 ways of committing a Quidditch foul, and that all of them had happened during the World Cup match in 1493. That Seekers were usually the smallest and fastest players, and that most serious Quidditch accidents seemed to happen to them. That although people rarely died playing Quidditch, referees had been known to vanish and turn up months later in the Sahara Desert. Hermione had become a bit more relaxed about breaking rules since Harry and Ron had saved her from the mountain troll, and she was much nicer for it. The day before Harry's first Quidditch match, the three of them were out in the freezing courtyard during break, and she had conjured them up a blue fire, which could be carried around in a jam jar. They were standing with their backs to it, getting warm, when Snape crossed the yard. Harry noticed at once that Snape was limping. Harry, Ron, and Hermione moved closer together to block the fire from view. They were sure it wouldn't be allowed. Unfortunately, something about their guilty faces caught Snape's eye. He limped over. He hadn't seen the fire, but he seemed to be looking for a reason to tell them off anyway. "What's that you've got there, Potter?" It's Quidditch Through the Ages," Harry showed him. "Library books are not to be taken outside the school," said Snape. "Give it to me. 5 points from Gryffindor." "He's just made that rule up," Harry muttered angrily as Snape limped away. "Wonder what's wrong with his leg." "Don't know, but I hope it's really hurting him," said Ron. The Gryffindor common room was very noisy that evening. Ron, Harry, and Hermione sat together next to the window. Harry was checking Harry and Ron's charms homework for them. She would never let them copy. How will you learn? But by asking her to read it through, they've got the right answers anyway. Harry felt restless. He wanted Quidditch Through the Ages back to take his mind off his nerves about tomorrow. Why should he be afraid of Snape? Getting up, he told Ron and Hermione he was going to ask Snape if he could have it. "Rather you than me," they said together, but Harry had an idea that Snape wouldn't refuse if there were other teachers listening. He made his way down the staff room and knocked. There was no answer. He knocked again. Nothing. Perhaps Snape had left the book in there. It was worth a try. He pushed the door ajar and peered inside, and a horrible scene met his eyes. Snape and Filch were inside alone. Snape was holding his robes above his knees. One of his legs was bloody and mangled, and Filch was handing Snape bandages. "Blasted thing," Snape was saying. "How are you supposed to keep your eyes on all three heads at once?" Harry tried to shut the door quietly, but Potter! Snape's face was twisted with fury as he dropped his robes quickly to hide his legs. Harry gulped. "I just wondered if I can have my book back." "Get out! Out!" Harry left. Before Snape could take any more points from Gryffindor, he sprinted back upstairs. "Did you get it?" Ron asked as Harry joined them. "What's the matter?" In a low whisper, Harry told him what he'd seen. "You know what that means," he finished breathlessly. "He tried to get past the three-headed dog at Halloween. That's where he was when we saw him. He's after whatever it's guarding, and I'd bet my broomstick he let that troll in to create a diversion." Hermione's eyes were wide. "No, he wouldn't steal. He wouldn't," she said. "I know he's not very nice, but he wouldn't try to steal something Dumbledore was keeping safe." "Honestly, Hermione, do you think all the teachers are saints or something?" snapped Ron. "I'm with Harry. I wouldn't put Snape past anything. But what's he after? What's the dog guarding?" Harry went to bed with his head buzzing with the same question. Neville was snoring loudly, but Harry couldn't sleep. He tried to empty his mind. He needed to sleep. He had to. He had his first Quidditch match in a few hours, but the expression on Snape's face when Harry had seen his leg wasn't easy to forget. The next morning dawned very bright and cold. The great hall was full of delicious smell of fried sausages and the cheerful chatter of everyone looking forward to the good Quidditch match. "You've got to eat some breakfast." "I don't want anything. Just a bit of toast," wielded Hermione. "I'm not hungry." Harry felt terrible. In an hour's time, he'd be walking on the first pitch. "Harry, you need your strength," said Seamus Finnegan. "Seekers are always the one getting nobbled by the other team. Thanks, Seamus, said Harry, watching Seamus pile ketchup on his sausages. By 11 o'clock, the whole school seemed to be out in the stands around the Quidditch pitch. Many students had binoculars. The seats were raised high in the air, but it was still difficult to see what was going on sometimes. Ron and Hermione joined Neville, Seamus, and Dean in the West Ham fan in the top row. As a surprise for Harry, they had painted a large banner on one of the sheets Grabber's had ruined. It said Potter for President, and Dean, who was very good at drawing, had done a large Gryffindor line underneath. Then Hermione had performed a tricky little charm so that the paint flashed different colors. Meanwhile, in the changing rooms, Harry and the rest of the team were changing into the scarlet Quidditch robes. Slytherin would be playing in green. Wood cleared his voice for silence. "Okay, men," he said, "and women," said Chaser Angelina Johnson. "And women," Wood agreed. "This is it. The big one," said Fred Weasley. "The one we've all been waiting for," said George. "We know Oliver's speech by heart," Fred told Harry. "We were in the team last year." "Shut up, you two," said Wood. "This is the best team Gryffindor's had in years. We are going to win. I know it." He glared at them all as if to say, "Or else." "Right. It's time. Good luck, all of you." Harry followed Fred and George out of the changing room and, hoping his knees weren't going to give away, walked on to the pitch to loud cheers. Madame Hooch was refereeing. She stood in the middle of the pitch, waiting for the two teams, her broom in her hand. "Now I want a nice fair game, all of you," she said. Once they were all gathered round her, Harry noticed that she seemed to be speaking particularly to the Slytherin captain, Marcus Flint, a fifth year. Harry thought Flint looked as if he had some troll blood in him. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a fluttering banner high above, flashing Potter for President over the crowd. His heart skipped. He felt braver. "Mount your brooms, please," Harry clamored on his Nimbus 2000. Madame Hooch gave a loud blast on her whistle. 15 brooms rose up, high into the air. They were off. "And the quaffle is taken immediately by Angelina Johnson of Gryffindor. What an excellent chaser that girl is, and rather attractive, too. Jordan!" "Sorry, Professor." The Weasley twins' friends, Lee Jordan, was doing the commentary for the match, closely watched by Professor McGonagall. "And she's really belting along up there. A neat pass to Alicia Spinnet. A good find of Oliver Woods last year, only a reserve. Back to Johnson, and no Slytherin have taken the quaffle. Slytherin Captain Marcus Flint gains the quaffle, and off he goes. Flint flying like an eagle up there. He's going to stopped by an excellent move by Gryffindor Keeper Wood. And Gryffindor take the quaffle. That's Chaser Katie Bell of Gryffindor there. Nice dive around Flint, up off the field. And ouch, that must have hurt. Hit in the back of the head by a bludger. Quaffle taken by Slytherin. That's Adrian Pusey speeding off towards the goalpost, but he's blocked by a second bludger, sent his way by Fred and George Weasley. Can't tell which. Nice play by the Gryffindor beater, anyway. And Johnson back in possession of the quaffle. A clear field ahead, and off she goes. She's really flying. Dodges a speeding bludger. The goalposts are ahead. Come on now, Angelina. Keeper Belchy dives, misses. Gryffindor score. Gryffindor cheers filled the cold air with howls and moans from the Slytherins. Budge up there, move along, Hagrid. Harry and Hermione squeezed together to give Hagrid enough space to join them. "Been watching from a hut," said Hagrid, patting a large pair of binoculars around his neck. "But it isn't the same as being in the crowd. No sign of the snitch yet, eh?" "Nope," said Ron. "Harry hasn't had much to do yet. Keep out of trouble, though, that's something," said Hagrid, raising his binoculars and peering skywards at the speck that was Harry. Way up above them, Harry was gliding over the game, squinting above the same sign of the snitch. That was part of his and Wood's game plan. Keep out of the way until you catch sight of the snitch. Wood had said, "We don't want you attacked before you have to be." When Angelina had scored, Harry had done a couple of loop-de-loops to let out his feelings. Now he was back to staring around for the snitch. Once he caught sight of the flash of gold. But it was just a reflection of one of the Weasleys' wristwatches, and once a bludger decided to come pelting his way more like a cannonball than anything. But Harry dodged it, and Fred Weasley came chasing after it. "All right there, Harry," he had time to yell. as he beat his bludger furiously towards Marcus Flint. Slytherin in possession, Lee Jordan was saying. Chaser Percy ducks 2 bludgers, 2 Weasleys, and a chaser ball, and speeds towards the— wait a minute, was that the snitch? A murmur ran through the crowd as Adrian Percy dropped the quaffle, too busy looking over his shoulder at the flash of gold that had passed by his left ear. Harry saw it. It was in a great rush of excitement he dived towards. After the streak of gold, Slytherin seeker Terence Higgs had seen it too. Neck and neck, they hurled towards the snitch, and all the chasers seemed to have forgotten what they were supposed to be doing as they hung in midair to watch. Harry was faster than Higgs. He could see the little round ball, wings fluttering, darting up ahead. He put on an extra burst of speed. Wham! A roar of rage echoed from the Gryffindors below. Marcus Flint had blocked Harry on purpose, and Harry's broom spun off course. Harry holding on for dear life. Foul! Screaming the Gryffindors. Madam Hooch spoke angrily to Flint and then ordered a free shot at the goalpost for Gryffindor. But in all the confusion, of course, the golden snitch had disappeared from sight again. Down in the stands, Dean Thomas was yelling, "Send him off, ref! Red card!" "This isn't football, Dean," Ron reminded him. "You can't send people off in Quidditch, and what's a red card?" But Hagrid was on Dean's side. They ought to change the rules. Flint could have knocked Harry out of the air. Lee Jordan was finding it difficult not to take sides. So, after that obvious and disgusting bit of cheating— "Jordan," growled Professor McGonagall. "I mean, after that open and revolting— Jordan, I'm warning you." All right. Flint nearly kills the Gryffindor seeker, which could have happened to anyone, I'm sure, so no penalty to Gryffindor. So a penalty to Gryffindor, taken by Spinnet, who puts it away, no trouble, and we continue play. Gryffindor still in possession. It was as Harry dodged another bludger, which went spinning dangerously past his head, that it happened. His broom gave a sudden, frightening lurch. For a split second, he thought he was going to fall. He gripped the broom tightly with both hands and knees. He had never felt anything like it. It happened again. It was as though the broom was trying to buck him off, but Nimbus 2000 did not suddenly decide to buck off their riders. Harry tried to turn back towards the Gryffindor goalpost. He had half a mind to ask Wood to call a timeout, and then he realized that his broom was completely out of control. He couldn't turn it. He couldn't direct it at all. He was zigzagging through the air every now and then and making violent swishing movements which all unseated him. Lee was still commentating. Slytherin in position, Flint with the quaffle, passes Spinnet, passes Bell, hit hard in the face by a bludger. Hope it broke his nose. Only joking, Professor. Slytherin score. Oh no! The Slytherins were cheering. No one seemed to have noticed that Harry's broom was behaving strangely. It was carrying him slowly higher, away from the game, jerking and twitching as it went. "I don't know what Harry thinks he's doing," Hagrid mumbled. He stared through his binoculars. "If he didn't know better, I'd say he lost control of his broom. But he can't have." Suddenly, people were pointing up at Harry all over the stands. His broom had started to roll over and over, with him only just managing to hold on. The whole crowd gasped, and Harry's broom had given a wild jerk, and Harry swung off it. He was now dangling from it, holding on with only one hand. "Did something happen to it when Flint blocked him?" Seamus whispered. "Can't have," Hagrid said, shaking his voice. "Can't nothing interfere with a broomstick except powerful dark magic. No kid could do that to a Nimbus 2000. At these words, Hermione seized Hagrid's binoculars, but instead of looking up at Harry, she stared, looking frantically at the crowd. "What are you doing?" cried Ron, grey-faced. "I knew it," Hermione gasped. "Snape, look." Ron grabbed the binoculars. Snape was in the middle of the stands, opposite them. He had his eyes fixed on Harry and was muttering nonstop under his breath. "He's doing something, jinxing the broom," said Hermione. "What should we do?" "Leave it to me." Before Ron could say another word, Hermione had disappeared. Ron turned the binoculars back on Harry. His broom was vibrating so hard, it was almost impossible for him to hang on much longer. The whole crowd were on their feet, watching, terrified, as the Weasleys flew up to try to pull Harry safely safely on one of their brooms. But it was no good. Every time they got near him, the broom would jump higher still. They dropped lower and circled beneath him, obviously hoping to catch if he fell. Marcus Flint seized the quaffle and scored 5 times without anyone noticing. "Come on, Hermione," Ron muttered desperately. Hermione had fought her way across the stand where Snape stood and was now racing along the row behind him. She didn't even stop to say sorry as she knocked Professor Quirrell's head first into the first row. Reaching Snape, she crouched down, pulled out her wand, and whispered a few chosen words. Bright blue flames shot from her wand on the hem of Snape's robes. It took perhaps 30 seconds for Snape to realize that he was on fire. A sudden yelp told her that she had done her job. Scooping the fire off into a little jar in her pocket, she scrambled back along the row. Snape would never know what happened. It was enough. Up in the air, Harry was suddenly able to clamber back on his broom. Neville, you can look, Ron said. Neville had been sighing into Hagrid's jacket for the last 5 minutes. Harry was speeding towards the ground when the crowd saw him clap his hands on his mouth as though he was about to be sick. He hit the pitch on all fours, coughed, and something gold fell into his hand. I've got the snitch, he shouted, waving it above his head. The game ended in complete confusion. He didn't catch it. He swallowed it. Flint was still howling 20 minutes later, but it made no difference. Harry hadn't broken any rules, and Lee Jordan was happily shouting the result. Gryffindor had won by 170 to 60. Harry had heard none of this, though. He was being made a cup of strong tea in Hagrid's hut with Ron and Hermione. It was Snape, Ron was exclaiming. Hermione and I saw him. He was cursing your broomstick, muttering he wouldn't take his eyes off you. Rubbish, said Hagrid, who hadn't heard a word of what had gone on next to him in the stands. Why would Snape do something like that? Ron, Harry, and Hermione looked at each other, wondering what to tell him. Harry decided on the truth. I found out something about him, he told Hagrid. He tried to get past the three-headed dog at Halloween. It bit him. We think that he's trying to steal whatever it's guarding. Hagrid dropped his teapot. How do you know about Fluffy? He said. Fluffy? Yeah, he's mine. I bought him off a Greek chappie I met in a pub last year. I lent him to Dumbledore to guard the... Yes? Said Harry eagerly. Now, don't ask me any more, said Hagrid gruffly. That's top secret, that is. But Snape's trying to steal it. Rubbish, said Hagrid again. Snape's a Hogwarts teacher. He had nothing of the sort. So why would he try to kill Harry? Cried Hermione. This afternoon's events had certainly seemed to have changed her mind about Snape. I know a jinx when I see one, Hagrid, and I've read all about them. You've got to keep eye contact, and Snape wasn't blinking at all. I saw him. I'm telling you, you're wrong, said Hagrid hotly. I don't know why Harry's broom acted like that, but Snape wouldn't try to kill a student. Now listen to me, all three of you. You're meddling in things that don't concern you. It's dangerous. You forget that dog, and you forget what it's guarding. That's between Professor Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel. Aha, said Harry. So there's someone named Nicholas Flamel involved, is there? Hagrid looked furious at himself. Chapter 12. The Mirror of Erased. Christmas was coming. One morning in mid-December, Hogwarts woke to find itself covered in several feet of snow. The lake froze solid, and the Weasley twins were punished for bewitching several snowballs so that they followed Quirrell around, bouncing off the back of his turban. The few owls that managed to battle the way through the stormy sky to deliver the post had been nursed back to health by Hagrid before they could fly off again. No one could wait for the holidays to start. While the Gryffindor common room and the Great Hall had roaring fires, the draughty corridors had become icy and bitter. Wind rattled the windows in the classrooms. Worst of all were Professor Snape's classes down in the dungeon, where their breath rose in a mist before them as they kept as close as possible to the hot cauldrons. I do feel so sorry, said Draco Malfoy, one potions class, for all those people who have to stay at Hogwarts for Christmas because they're not wanted at home. He was looking over at Harry as he spoke. Grabble and Goyle chuckled. Harry, who was measuring out powdered spine of lionfish, ignored them. Malfoy had been even more unpleasant than usual since the Quidditch match. Disgusted that Slytherin had lost, he had tried to get everyone laughing at how a wide-mouthed tree frog would be replacing Harry as the next Seeker. Then he realized that nobody found this funny because they were all so impressed the way Harry had just managed to stay on his bucking broomstick. So Malfoy, jealous and angry, had got back to taunting Harry about having no proper family. It was true that Harry wasn't going back to Privet Drive for Christmas. Professor McGonagall had come round the week before, making a list of students who would be staying for the holidays, and Harry had signed up at once. He didn't feel sorry for himself at all. This would probably be the best Christmas he'd ever had. Ron and his brothers were staying too because Mr. and Mrs. Weasley were going to Romania to visit Charlie. When they left the dungeons at the end of potions, they found a large fir tree blocking the corridor ahead. Two enormous feet sticking out of the bottom, and a loud puffing sound told them that Hagrid was behind it. "Hi, Hagrid. Want any help?" Ron asked, sticking his head through the branches. "Nah, I'm all right. Thanks, Ron." "Would you mind moving out of the way?" "Come," Malfoy's cold drawl from behind them. "Are you trying to earn some extra money, Weasley? Hoping to be a gamekeeper yourself when you leave Hogwarts, I suppose. That hut of Hagrid's must seem like a palace compared to what your family's used to." Ron dived at Malfoy just as Snape came across the stairs. "Weasley!" Ron let go of the front of Malfoy's robes. "He was provoked," Professor Snape said Hagrid, sticking his huge hairy face out from behind the tree. "Malfoy was insulting his family. Being that as it may, fighting is against Hogwarts rules, Hagrid," said Snape silkingly. 5 points from Gryffindor, Weasley, and be grateful it isn't more. "Move along, all of you." Malfoy, Grable, and Goyle pushed roughly past the tree, scattering needles everywhere and smirking. "I'll get him," said Ron, grinding his teeth at Malfoy's back. "One of these days, I'll get him." "I hate them both," said Harry, Malfoy, and Snape. "Come on, cheer up. It's nearly Christmas," said Hagrid. Tell you what. Come with me and see the Great Hall. It looks like a treat." So Harry, Ron, and Hermione followed Hagrid and his tree off to the Great Hall, where Professor McGonagall and Professor Flintwood were busy with the Christmas decorations. "Ah, Hagrid, the last tree. Put it in the far corner, would you?" The hall looked spectacular. Festoons of holly and mistletoe hung all around the halls, and no fewer than 12 towering Christmas trees stood around the room, some sparkling with tiny icicles, some glittering with hundreds of candles. "How many days you got left until the holidays?" Hagrid asked. "Just one," said Hermione, "and that reminds me, Harry, Ron, we've got a half an hour before lunch. We should be in the library." "Oh yeah, you're right," said Ron, tearing his eye away from Professor Flintwood, who had golden bubbles blossoming out of his wand and was trailing them over the branches of the new tree. "The library," said Hagrid, following them out of the hall. "Just before the holidays. Bit keen, aren't you?" "Oh no, we're not working," Harry told him brightly. "Ever since you mentioned Nicholas Flamel, we're trying to find out who he is." "You what?" Hagrid looked shocked. "Listen here, I've told you to drop it. It's nothing to do with what the dog's guarding. We just want to know who Nicholas Flamel is. That's all," said Hermione. "Unless you'd like to tell us and save us the trouble," Harry added. "He must have been through 100 books already, and we can't find him anywhere. Just give us a hint. I know I've read his name somewhere." "I'm saying nothing," said Hagrid flatly. "Just have to find out ourselves then," said Ron, and they left Hagrid looking disgruntled and hurried off to the library. They had indeed been searching books for Flannel's name ever since Hagrid had let it slip, because how else were they going to find out what Snape was trying to steal? The trouble was, it was very hard to know where to begin, not knowing what Flamel might have done to get himself into a book. He wasn't in the great wizards of the 20th century, noble magical names of our time. He was missing, too, from important modern magical discoveries and a study of recent developments in wizardry. And then, of course, there was the sheer size of the library, tens of thousands of books, thousands of shelves, hundreds of narrow rows. Hermione took out a list of subjects and titles she had decided to search, while Ron strode off down the row of books and started pulling off the shelves at random. Harry started wandering over to the restricted section. He had been wondering for a while if Flamel wasn't somewhere in there. Unfortunately, you needed a specially signed note from one of the teachers to look in any restricted books, and he knew he'd never get one. These books were containing powerful dark magic never taught at Hogwarts, and only read by older students studying advanced defense against the dark arts. "What are you looking for, boy?" "Nothing," said Harry. Madam Prince, the librarian, brandished a feather duster at him. "You'd better get out then. Go on, out." Wishing he'd been a bit quicker at thinking up a story, Harry left the library. He, Ron, and Hermione had already agreed they'd better not ask Madame Prince where they could find Flimmel. They were sure she'd be able to tell them, but they couldn't ask. But they couldn't risk Snape hearing what they were up to. Harry waited outside the corridor to see if the other two had found anything, but he wasn't hopeful. They had been looking for a fortnight, after all, but as they had only odd moments between lessons, it wasn't surprising they'd found nothing. What they really needed was a nice long search without Madame Prince breathing down their necks. 5 minutes later, Ron and Hermione joined him, shaking their heads. They went off to lunch. "You will keep looking while I'm away, won't you?" said Hermione. "And send me an owl if you find anything. And you could ask your parents if they know who Flimmel is," said Ron. "It'd be safe to ask them." "Very safe, as they're both dentists," said Hermione. Once the holidays had started, Ron and Harry were having too good a time to think much about Flimmel. They had the dormitory to themselves, and the common room was far emptier than usual, so they were able to get the good armchairs by the fire. They sat by the hour eating anything that they could spear at the toasting fork: bread, crumpets, marshmallows, the plodding ways of getting Malfoy expelled, which were fun to talk about even if they didn't work. Ron also started teaching Harry wizard chess. This was exactly like Muggle chess, except the figures were alive, which made it a lot like directing troops in battle. Ron's set was very old and battered. Like everything else he owned, it had once belonged to someone else in the family, in this case his grandfather. However, old chessmen weren't a drawback at all. Ron knew them so well that he never had trouble getting them to do what he wanted. Harry played with the chessmen Seamus Finnegan had lent him, and they didn't trust him at all. He wasn't a very good player yet, and they kept shouting different bits of advice at him, which was confusing. "Don't send me there. Can't you see his knight? Send him. We can afford to lose him." On Christmas Eve, Harry went to bed, looking forward to the next day for the food and the fun, but not expecting any presents at all. When he woke early next morning, however, the first thing he saw was a pile of small packages at the foot of his bed. "Happy Christmas," said Ron sleepily, and Harry scrambled out of bed and pulled on his dressing gown. "You too," said Harry. "Will you look at this? I've got some presents." "What did you expect? Turnips?" said Ron, turning his own pile, which was a lot bigger than Harry's. Harry picked up the top parcel. It was wrapped in thick brown paper, and scrawled across it was "To Harry from Hagrid." Inside was a roughly cut wooden flute. Hagrid had obviously whittled it himself. Harry blew it. It sounded a bit like an owl. A second, very small parcel contained a note. "We've received your message and enclosed your Christmas present from Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia." Stellotaped to a note was a 50-pence piece. "That's friendly," said Harry. Ron was fascinated by the 50 pence. "Weird," he said. "What a shape. This is money?" "You can keep it," said Harry, laughing at how pleased Ron was. "Hagrid and my aunt and uncle. Who sent those?" "I think I know who that one's from," said Ron, going a bit pink and pointing to a very lumpy parcel. "My mom. I told her you didn't expect any presents, and oh no," he groaned, "she's made you a Weasley jumper." Harry had torn open the parcel to find a thick, hand-knitted sweater in emerald green and a large box of homemade fudge. "Every year she makes us a jumper," said Ron, unwrapping his own, "and mine's always maroon." "That's really nice of her," said Harry, trying the fudge, which was very tasty. His next present also contained sweets, a large box of chocolate frogs from Hermione. This left only one parcel. Harry picked it up and felt it. It was very light. He unwrapped it. Something fluid and silvery gray went slithering to the floor, where it lay at gleaming folds. Harry gasped. "I've heard of those," he said in a hushed voice, dropping the box of every flavor beans he'd gotten from Hermione. "If that's what I think it is, they're really rare and really valuable. What is it?" Harry picked up the shiny silvery cloth off the floor. It was strange to touch, like water woven into material. "It's an invisibility cloak," said Ron, a look of awe on his face. "I'm sure it is. Try it on." Harry threw the cloak around his shoulders and gave Ron a yell. "It is! Look down!" Harry looked down at his feet, but they had gone. He dashed to the mirror. Sure enough, his reflection looked back at him. just his head suspended in midair, his body completely invisible. He pulled the cloak over his head and his reflection vanished completely. "There's a note," said Ron suddenly. A note fell out of it. Harry pulled off the cloak and seized the letter. Written in a narrow, loopy handwriting he had never seen before were the following words: "Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well. A very nice Christmas." There was no signature, but we're out of time. So we'll start tomorrow. I hope that you guys are doing well. And I'll send your letter out in the mail today. I love you.